James Williams here with the Uptown Standard newspaper, and today we have City Council at Large candidate Donavan West. He's won in a very big field of candidates. So, Mr. West, thanks for joining us. And please open up and tell us about your candidacy. Why are you running for City Council?
Yeah. James, first of all, thank you for having me on your platform. I really appreciate it. It's especially significant that I have this interview with you because of how far back we go, good brother. So that means a lot. As for my candidacy and why and what and all that good stuff, as you already know, I'm Donovan West. I've been serving the community for many years in a number of different capacities. Right, I'm former president and CEO for the African American Chamber of Commerce. And I'm sure we'll get back to that in terms of talking about the business aspect of it all, but also former COO of faith-based, community-based organization, People for People, where I was at for over 16 years. Certain programs like the Pregnant and Parenting Youth Program, the EARN Center, which stood for Employment Advancement and Retention Network Center, that focus a lot on workforce development. The preschool, the charter school, fatherhood program, renewable energy, reentry program. So a ton of different programs and services to serve the whole family, not just a particular individual. And then also, of course, working at EDSI even back then. I think that's when we first met back in those days, in the early 2000s, working for the underserved and underemployed, community. So why am I running? I'm running because I did a gap analysis, James, and I realized what was missing in city council. And individuals like myself are missing, individuals who have worked in the field in terms of, from a programming standpoint, but also from an economic inclusion and economic development standpoint, individuals who have that experience and background in both spaces, being able to actually, represent those voices in city council. So my goal at the end of the day is to make sure that those communities are represented as we move forward. And this is a perfect time also, as I was doing that gap analysis, when you start to think about the amount of freshmen and sophomore legislators that will actually be in city council.
So you said a couple of things that threw me off for a second, right? Renewable energy. You mentioned that. And, with our commercial corridors going through what they're doing, taxes getting higher, PICO, definitely being a private owned company now. It's a lot of things. Renewable energy is right in the future of Philadelphia. I think it's an industry we have not gotten into yet that we need. What we have done, we've done, but definitely need to jump into it deeper. And you bring a wealth of experience in that. Do you think, and how do you think, if you do agree, do you think that benefits our local commercial corridors to be able to move to solar or renewable to lower some of them expenses, and mainly to our senior citizens who have a hard time meeting a lot of their bills now with the cost of property taxes and everything going up? Talk about that for a second for us.
Well, I think the first thing that we need to do, especially as you start talking about our vulnerable populations, is making sure that we leverage our resources that we currently have. The biggest issue that I see is that there's not enough actual application or usage, or should I say overall leveraging of those resources. So they're there. And often we get to certain meetings and we hear about this wealth of different resources that are available. So I think the first thing we need to focus on is getting them to the actual end user, those who they're intended for, as well as, of course, talking about the overall process. The process does not need to be so complicated or even be so restrictive. So I think the first thing we need to do is that, and then at the same time, if those same resources can be applied to securing solar panels or the installation or things along those lines, it is extremely important that we do update and upgrade, up level those homes in those different spaces so that we can keep the prices down, because it should not be a situation where you as a senior are thinking about where you need to move, especially at that point in your life.
So, Chamber of Commerce, right? That's the reason, I really wanted to talk to you. With the amount of people running for council, especially in the at-large seats, and honestly, and when we had this conversation offline, My fear is that we're losing Dom, we're losing David O. We're losing individuals who were business focused, right? And we're going in more of, I believe, city council is moving more into an activist role. Um, how do you position yourself on council? Will they be receptive to, I believe, the things that a business person like yourself coming from the chamber is going to see? Philadelphia, we're losing businesses. Um, and now with the hybrid job economy, people feel that, one of my best friends is a stockbroker. And his job's like, as long as you live 200 miles within 200 miles range of the office, you're fine.
Wow.
We looking at these things, right? How do we compete, and how do you position yourself in that? And I'll have a follow up or two after that, but how do you position yourself on council with your experience dealing with more activist council people now, and not as much business minded or even have business experience on council?
Well, that's a great question. I think the first thing we need to do is we need to identify what's important to all of us. What do we have in common? So activists, a lot of times, when you think about an activist, you may think about the things that they are focused on as it relates to, their heart, right? What their passion is, or a sense of purpose. And from my perspective, obviously, if I'm looking at, getting Philadelphia back to business, and often you'll hear me say that I want us to get back to business. I want us to get focused on, how does this all add up? How does this actually serve all of us? And how do we actually get not all of our needs met, but those that are most important. And then we can look at what else we can add to that essential list, if you will. It comes down to, again, just focusing on what's important to you. Why are you an activist? For what? What's the goal? Is it quality of life? Okay, so let's talk about your definition of quality life, or let's talk about your definition of safety and what that looks like. Let's talk about, let's get to the, can I, as my math teacher would say, can I just see your work? Right? You can't just get to the end. Like, how did you arrive there? So let's talk about that. And somewhere in there, we can see what we may have in common, what's important to us. And we may be approaching it differently, right? So while many people may pause for a second when they hear I'm a business person, right? Because they may think that's devoid of moral, or they may think it's devoid of compassion or empathy. No, it's not at all. It's about making sure at the end of the day that we can make a good business model, right? Structure, a blueprint for how we want to do certain things. And then also, more importantly, we can appeal to other markets in terms of what's our UVP, what's our unique value proposition, in a way that it's going to meet that triple bottom line, right? Not just good for society, but good for that bottom line. Because what we have to admit is that Philadelphia is the biggest business of them all, right? Philadelphia itself is a big business. If no one wants to come to Philadelphia, it loses money, right? If no one wants to stay in Philadelphia, it loses money. If Philadelphia is a dangerous place to come to live, to exist, to have fun, it loses money, right? So while you may say, hey, listen, we need to do X, Y, and Z, and you're coming from your heart with it, no problem at all. I think once we sit down, right, and we get away from this emotionally eliciting language and this, things to all this rhetoric that's just to get people hyped, and we sit down and say, okay, no, really, what does that look like to you when you talk about these things that you're so passionate about? What does that actually look like? Not just what we just need to do in a broad sense, but what does it actually look like structurally? How is it actually sustainable? Where are we going to get the money from? Right? Let's just have these conversations. And guess what? These questions are annoying to a lot of people. I understand, but they still need to be answered.
No, that's facts. That's facts. And so you mentioned safe place, business is staying. More businesses are closing earlier. They're packing up shop. They're leaving the city of Philadelphia. Safety is an issue. Most of our colleges, their enrollment is down on their freshman class because of prom. Their transfer rates are higher than they've ever been. We are a city of eds and meds. What do we do in Philadelphia as we're losing the eds because of the crime?
Well, again, this goes right back to what I was just now talking about. That is, if we do not get our arms around crime, right? Crime is crippling. And this season of lawlessness and what I would call domestic terrorism has to end. And so when we all realize just how important it is, perhaps we look at our budget differently in terms of the allocation of funds and where it's going and what are the metrics, right? And being clear in terms of certain milestones being met. Also, what else we're going to do about that in terms of if we don't see the outcomes that are desired. Is there a corrective action plan? Are there other people in the pipeline or entities in the pipeline that we want to engage in order to be able to get our arms around it? How are we going to do this from an intergovernmental approach in terms of leveraging those relationships and those resources to really show our real, our collective approach to handling this, right? Demonstrating the real capacity to actually stomp this out, or at least reduce it dramatically, so that we can get back in control of this issue. So I think it's important that we focus on, what's most important. I'm gonna say it again. I think it's important that we focus on what's most important. I didn't say that by accident, right? We talk about it, but where's the actual focus, right? Every candidate you'll talk to will say that there are the top three things, right? We talk about poverty, we talk about crime, we talk about education, right? We talk about these things, but where's the actual focus as it relates to the budget, as it relates to the alliances that we need to forge, right? And the application, the execution, the metrics, like the modification if necessary. Where's the focus so that we can get our arms around it? Because here's the funny thing about it. We're now in the month of April, approaching May very, very soon. When it comes to people coming back to school in the fall, do we have any answers, right? Because what we're going to experience is additional attrition if we don't. And so it's not just about what we're going to do in 2024. No, what are we doing now? And so moving with the sense of urgency and saying, this is actually very important. So our mayor today we need to engage our mayor today, because Mayor Kenny is still our mayor, right? Our systems and resources are still what they are. So while we propose what we want to do, once I get into city council and others, what are we doing now to demonstrate just how urgent it is? Because I don't want to hear about another 15-year-old that just got stabbed, or another one that was on the way to school and just got shot. I don't want to hear that and say, okay, well, help is on its way. It's coming in 6 or 7 months. Are we serious?
So, quick question on that, and stop and frisk. Are you for it or are you against it?
That's not a quick question. I'll tell you that I'm for a version of policing that is very aggressive. And what the version of it that I call is, we actually had it some years ago. It was a focused deterrence. Chief Charles Ramsey, he actually did it, and he did it well. It was a partnership with social service agencies and workforce development agencies to provide some healthy alternatives, but also it was based on specific data in terms of identifying who the perpetrators are, as well as those that are, typical victims, right? So it's very comprehensive, it's very holistic, it's very aggressive, and I think that's where we are in the game. So stop and frisk in itself, how it's been applied traditionally, I am not for that. However, I am for some version of it that is going to be aggressive, especially targeting those that, because we know who's doing it, and we need to stop being a city that is, watching certain crimes being committed in certain spaces, especially in the city. It's not applicable. It shouldn't be. If it's not okay in Chestnut Hill, it shouldn't be okay in South Philly.
Now, so I know a lot about you, right? So this question here is a question that I just want to really see where you're at, and I'm going to lay out a scenario for you. You're very familiar with Atlantic City. You're very familiar with the mayor there, right? You know of them. We're all from the same circles. We have, we know what's going on. They took their COVID relief money, and he invested in a camera program throughout the city. I have a residency there, summer residency there, and I can tell you, I've watched our homicide number there drop, and as our homicide number dropped, business has grown, right? And he said something very interesting to me that, look, I want to do more market affordable housing. I want to see people who live in Philly come to Atlantic City because they want to be safer. And we can see the plan moving very aggressively there with the new stuff being done, right? And we know what's going on in our counties. Our people are leaving to our counties. You being from the position that you are and knowing the stuff that you know, how do we better position ourselves to keep our citizens, to grow our economy, but also to make sure that people stay in Philly who work in Philly because they want to be in Philly?
I'm glad you asked the question. I mean, speaking to the technical, up leveling of the security system in Atlantic City, I remember moving to Francisville um, in 2000, and I remember the blue lights that were on the corner, and people were like, "Yo, you're crazy! Why are you even moving down there? X, Y, and Z." But I looked at being close in proximity to the art museum, the city, everything, right? It was beautiful to me. And I don't have a problem with the hood. I love the hood. I mean, I love the fact that I walk in through the hood with my suit and my briefcase back then. Yes, back in the day we had briefcases. And and doing my thing. I say that to say that the camera system is something that is a classic, but it's important that people know that on some level you need to do that, especially in certain areas of the city. You need to pay attention. So one of the things I would absolutely advocate for is making sure that all the cameras that we have right now that are not working, that we get them working, right? And that we do put up more cameras in certain spaces and places. That we also look at maybe reducing the hours of operation for certain businesses in areas where they are high trafficking in terms of drugs and crime overall. We need to look at those things and take a serious look in terms of, are we harboring, or creating an environment that is right now it's not healthy, right? It's just not healthy. We have to think about the greater good in terms of public safety. As it relates to maintaining, expanding our residents. Number one, they have to feel safe. Number two, in terms of feeling comfortable to pursue careers and also other endeavors like starting a business. Philadelphia needs to be more of a fertile ground for business development, especially for Black businesses. You've heard of it before in terms of 2.5 to 3% of businesses are Black, right? And while I don't agree with that percentage, I do agree that the infrastructure, the systems that are currently in place are too complicated, convoluted. They're vague, in terms of all the things you may need to do. And many people decide to just work under the table. I want to make sure that we further engage our informal economy. That is the businesses that are working under the table. I want to make sure that we do that. Why? Because when we identify those businesses in terms of their need to actually move above to above the table, right? What we have now is a stronger tax base, but more importantly, those businesses will get rid of the myth that a business is a tax burden, and really actually start to embrace the fact that your business can really be a tax shelter. See, that's what many of us from a Black and brown perspective have never heard of and never thought of, but it was always put out there in that space that it was a tax burden. And so we used to promote when we got to the tax man about how many losses we had and trying to play this game. And no, that's not the way to do it. Right. So we got to just be a little bit more sophisticated, but it takes trusted messengers to provide the technical assistance to help navigate through that. So that means a lot, because for many people that have a business and want to actually expand their business, they find themselves having to be very strategic in terms of how they do that. And in many ways, still remain extremely fragile, right? And not necessarily mature in the development of the business. So we need to do that as well. Last but not least, when you start talking about housing, Philadelphians need to be able to afford to live in Philadelphia. And so we do need to make sure that we roll out and continue to maintain with fidelity a number of different tax incentives to spur and to increase development. I've talked to a lot of developers, small and large, and Philadelphia currently does not fit anyone right now because of certain tax issues, as well as, of course, as I mentioned to you before, the process overall of accessing capital. These are some major challenges that we need to address. So we need to engage both our traditional and non-traditional lenders, right? The CDFIs need to be activated, but also supported, community development financial institutions to be more specific. And we need to be able to say, okay, you know what? For your first time homeowners, for your for blacks and brown people that are in the space that want to get into home ownership? What are the modifications we may need to make? It can be a number of things, and I can talk in greater detail about it in terms of whether we're talking about mortgage conditions or we're talking about amortization. There are a number of different things that we can approach to make this a more reasonable situation when it comes to home ownership. And I'd love to, usher some of those policies in, right, in city council.
So, I mean, you hit that from every angle that I was looking for that answer. And I mean, that was very clear, concise, well thought of. But I think it shows that you have the experience where you can just come off with this stuff because you know it, right? You know the subject matter. Um, Now I know you had some experience. You were saying earlier with a charter school, if I'm correct. On
Mm-hmm.
education, we see what's going on with our schools, right? We see what's going on with the asbestos, right? We see that we have a 48% chronic truancy rate, right? Where we know that a lot of the kids who are committing this juvenile crime, they're right there in that population, right? They're right there. I'm a former mental health worker in the schools over 10 years, worked for the court system as a youth advocate. We know that's the population. We know where they're at. They're part of that truancy number. But our schools just have many different issues. Me, myself, I think our school system is too big to be successful. And we need to go to a county model like Montgomery County and the rest of the counties around us have.
Mm-hmm.
You might have
Mm-hmm.
a Mount Airy school system or a Mount Airy school district. Right? You might have a North Philadelphia school district, and people say, "Well, that's not fair." But when you include Spring Garden and Fairmount into that North Philadelphia district, I think it is fair, right? Or Center City, or you really can cut it up the right way to make it really work. But just on the outdated buildings, right? And from your point of view, what's your vision? Because city council advises and consents the school district, right? You're in that role. What's your vision
Yeah,
on
I think we need to build. I think we need to develop, new schools. I think it's, in terms of, cleaning up the lead and asbestos. I think we should do that for any building that anyone is, that is being occupied. But to be more specific, building new schools that are more reflective of what the needs are of the children, and also build them to the scale of the amount of children that are going to be at that school. We have so many buildings right now where the amount of students in there equal maybe 30 to 40% capacity, right? Why? So we need to look at, again, new accommodations, from a technical infrastructure to everything from top to bottom. Literally, the reason why I'm taking so much time to give this answer is because I don't know why we're even debating this. I really honestly don't. I mean, I like your ideas around, perhaps you want to do some level of redistricting, and there's some pros and cons to that. I like that idea, but the reason for the idea, I'm assuming, is just more attention to detail and having an infrastructure that can actually be a little more intense in terms of that particular area. I think is very similar to you have the 10 districts in the city, right, with the council person. So um, that but what's at the core of that is that we have this one size fits all, right? Um, and that's not true. You have these schools that are huge, and okay, we have students that are local. They go into it, and that's that, and we're going to clean it up, and that's it. That's not the case. What else has actually happened? What's actually evolved in terms of the students that are going to that school? What are the things that need to also be within that school setting? So yes, we can talk about the mental health component, nursing. We need to also talk about arts, right? Recreation. We need to get all those things back into that space. But also, more importantly, we got to deal with the trauma, right? We got to deal with the trauma being into some of these spaces as well. And when you look at old schools, right, they're a great example of how things haven't changed, right? Lack of investment, lack of self-worth, value, right? And so as you keep going to these old schools, it's very much a reflection of how much you really actually matter in the grand scheme of things. So I think many schools need to just really be, opened up, and we actually create a space where we can say, here's a new period of investment in our most precious asset, our children.
Now, and I'm with you on that. And here's what I want to add, right? And um, we have so much land, like you said, we have buildings that are not filled. So we have so much land that's available that we can really do good stuff with if we reimagine how we do these schools, knock some of them down and build brand new schools. I don't know the last time I've seen new schools really built in our neighborhoods. I mean, we've had some, but not near enough. And to add on that, coming from the African American Chamber, you're on council, right? We're going to speak that into existence with this. You're on council. We're going to knock down some schools. We're going to redo some schools. The district wants more money from the city council. Do you say 20% of the developers need to be African American on these
You
buildings?
said you
20,
said 20?
20, 10, whatever the
Oh
number
no,
is.
no, I'm gonna go up. I'm gonna go up. Definitely gonna go up on that. I mean, I would like there to be 40%, and here's the reason why. Even if we say, well, the number one argument is, well, we don't know if there's enough qualified capacity, right? Well, then I guess we're going to have to roll in a mentor protege approach to development for this project. I mean, we're going to encourage joint ventures, right? We're going to encourage partnerships when it comes to that. We'll also talk about how the city may be able to potentially be a bond partner as it relates to the projects, right? So there's a lot of different things that we can do in that space, as well as, of course, identify who our private partnerships are going to really be applicated, right? So applied, excuse me. So there's a lot that can happen in this space, right? And why? Because again, arguing the good business model, this makes sense to you, private companies. Why? You have schools now that is going to encourage, because of how nice they're going to be, how great, brand new. What does this do? This encourages your employees to stay. This increases retention, right? This reduces turnover. This helps to the quality of life. So this is not just you on some kumbaya. It's the right thing to do. No, it's a smart thing to do. So making the business argument for why up leveling our schools in these different areas is going to be very impactful for you as well.
So, I mean, that's the last of my questions for you. I'm glad that we actually got to sit down and do this. We're gonna get this stuff out to our readers. I think they need to learn more about you, and what you stand for and what you're for. I mean, I think people know you. That's the thing. I think you have the name IP, right? But to show that substance is there, is so key that you were able to give us
Thank
just
you.
this. I was as a former staffer, as all the stuff that I did in council, and as a reporter, um, you're very clear, concise. I think you're very fluid on your feet, far as being able to change subject matters, and we really
Thank
appreciate.
you.
Anything you have to say to our listeners, readers?
Well, the number one thing is I'm here to serve. I'm here to serve. I'm a servant leader. That's what my experience is in. I am stepping into the political space, and the only thing that's really going to change about me is my address. Should they decide to elect me to get into city council, I'm a highly collaborative leader. What that means is that while I have some very specific ideas about how we can address many of our major concerns for the city, I look forward to teaming up with my other, my peers, and those who have also been there before me, and learning more about where they're at, and learn about their rationale and how they're thinking, so that I can also assist them with some of the things that they may have on their plate. It's a team sport, and I look forward to being able to demonstrate not only teamwork, but also demonstrate my experience as a leader, being able to communicate effectively, convene, establish a common sense consensus amongst our peers, and being able to converge. That is, despite our differences, being able to identify what's most important and move as a body to get some things done. So I'm extremely optimistic about what we can achieve moving forward. We can redefine some scope of work and our impact overall. And last but not least, for those who do want to learn more about where I stand, they can go to my website, which is www.donavan, DONAVAN FOR Philly, PHILLY.com. That is DonovanforPhilly.com. And please, share some comments or questions that you may have. It's a highly interactive website. And again, I look forward to serving. Thank you so much for having me, James.
Thank you for joining us.